Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. I've got Greg Machinery Pete Peterson to talk about what's happening in the marketplace. But before we do that, this edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by John Deere. Greg, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, Casey. Yourself?
Oh, can't complain. A good time of the year for me, man. Football season started and hunting season opened up, so it's the best time of the year for me.
1 + 1 = 5. I like it.
At least 5, yeah. And it's we got fall weather out here too, so we got 50-degree mornings and high 70, low 80-degree days. So you can't beat that either. So it's
well, they feel great after all the 90s we've had this summer.
Tell you what, it's been real nice. Been real nice. And then kind of watching things change and things move forward. We're in that we are knocking on the door of the busiest time of the auction year as we look at things. We talked about a few sales before we started. We'll get to those here in a little bit. But Greg, let's talk a little bit about as you're looking at the pipeline now, we're seeing a lot of sales come through the pipeline and start seeing a lot of things get booked. Any surprises there? Anything standing out to you as far as uptick from what you've seen over the course of your career?
From the volume, no. I mean, we've been feeling it building here through 25 that we might see more activity on the farm auction side later in 25 into 26. Understandable. A bit of it driven by, of course, just tightening lending pressure. Folks needing to sell, free up some cash, keep the banker happy. Some older farmers just deciding maybe now is the time to retire after a few years of this current environment. But it'll be real interesting. We're not, like you say, we're coming up not too far away from the end of the year, November, December, which has always been a super active time for selling and for buying. And I'll be interested to see if we can reverse the trend we saw November, December of 24, which is only the second time in 22 years that I'd ever really seen auction prices back off. I mean, if we get a little positivity in the market, if that continues, it might point towards a maybe stronger end of the year.
Yeah, for sure. Talk a little bit more about that here later, but let's get to those two auctions you watched this week.
Well, it was one yesterday as we were recording here today. It was September 2nd by Sullivan Auctioneer Big Iron. It was kind of a dual auction. They had a farmer line out of Homer, Illinois, and then I believe, I can't remember the name of the outfit, more on the retail side with some equipment. And some interesting items, I thought. We've been talking about combines, had been backing off here through the second half of the summer. Now they had a 14 model S680, which of course we see tons of those S680s around. This one had 3,340 engine hours, sold for $69,000. That in particular is a little bit above the average auction price on a 14 model S680, which I think right now is something. Well, actually, I'll be specific. It's $62,747 is the average this year, and again, it brought 69 yesterday. But if we pull back. If you look at the average on a 14 model S680, really interesting. Last year, the average price was $80,185. 2 years ago, in 23, it was $99,000, almost $100,000, $99,900. And if you go back 3 years to 22, right before the combine started adjusting used values, it was $132,700. So again, this is just 14 models. So those had been some pretty big, and this year too, pretty big chunks downward in depreciation there. But again, combines have been a little better buys, I think, here the second half of the summer.
Yep. And if you look at what's going on, there's not a whole lot of reason for them to be breaking the bank because there's still a ton of them out there, and that's going to continue to be an issue.
Yeah, and that 14 model, not quite pre-def, so you're not catching the heat wave of the 10s and 09s, 11, 10s and 11 models we've been seeing, and we've talked about those. But same sale yesterday, they had a 17 model 8370R that had 4,499. It's basically 4,500 hours. That brought 127,850, which that's a little bit off the average, I think, which is 182.5 basically. So yeah, some good buys, but the one that really popped on the sale yesterday, Casey, was an older four-wheel drive, which we've seen some activity there. It was a beautiful looking 91 model Ford Versatile 1156 designation 6. 5,325 hours, went for 62.5. And that was off the Fairmont, Illinois line. And I know that had a lot of people talking. I just, before it on, I just threw a post on Facebook about it. So that big blue paint kind of gets them talking.
Yeah, that's a, you don't see very many of those out there anymore. You
No.
don't, especially that the Ford Blue. You don't see those very much, especially that model. I don't think I've seen one of those models sell for a while. So
I got looking at, I think 62.5 is the fifth highest I've ever run across for an 1156, but three of them, the three highest, were all from Swenson and Sons out of Minot, North Dakota. Folks will know them.
Yep.
Sell through auction time. End of the year, they tend to have an annual kind of it feels weird to say vintage now, 1980s, 90s, but classic big muscle tractors like that. Now, we should shout out to Sullivan's, too. Last week at the Farm Progress Show, I know a lot of people were walking the grounds and swung by the booth and saw that, let's see, it was an 89 model John Deere 8560 with 5,023 hours on it from George. Trying to remember George's last name. I think it was Braxma from Sydney, Iowa, and it was yellow. It was one of only two purchased by the U.S. Navy back in the day, and that brought $72,000, which I believe was an all-time record high. I think on 8560, so that was pretty cool last week.
Yeah, you see some of those oddities like that pop up every once in a while, and you wonder what they're actually bringing. That brought the money, That's a fair amount of money right there. So a lot of cool stuff looking forward to. So, Greg, let's do a little hypothetical here now. If you're looking at the current marketplace right now and you're watching corn and you're watching soybeans and stuff like that, we're seeing some movement, a lot of movement over the last week, and there's all the reports I can see. There's no reason why these movements should stop unless the USDA comes out and throws a wet blanket on it. But in their September report, which actually comes out in about 9 days. So the 12th of September is when that comes out. So assuming everything kind of keeps going the way they're going and the reports kind of stay with what the independent reports are looking at, you could see a significant jump of corn between now and the end of the year. Your thoughts on if we do see movement in the price of corn. I don't think it's going to change the actual pricing of equipment, right? I don't think we're going to see a huge run up in the price of equipment by any means. I'm not saying that at all, but I think more people coming to the table to buy stuff. We'll see some organic growth in prices as they come up from that. But it feels like there could be some volume at the end of the year that gets gobbled up because of this, that could bleed over to that first quarter. So I guess as you're looking at this, conversations you're having out there when you're at these different sales, what's your feel if we did see another quarter added onto the price of corn between now and the end of basically October?
Well, I think if we see that play out like you've described, Casey, I think it would counterbalance possibly the increase in the number of sales, and I think it would work towards continuing that plateauing we've seen here since February of 25, generally speaking, again, outside of combines, where values kind of fell hard last year, but kind of finding that footing. And I think it would work towards a little more, buying activity. It is interesting that USDA report, in September, I remember a couple times over the years, 16 years of doing YouTube videos, actually being out right after the report came out or day of, as that's being absorbed. And what the auction data has shown over the years is that any little bump or jump tends to, I'll put it this way, any movement up in corn or beans is reflected pretty dang quickly in auction pricing. Whereas oddly, if you flip it and it drops, it just takes a while to be digested and absorbed as truth. So I think if we see that bump, it'll work towards, not rocket science, but it'll strengthen auction pricing in general for sure.
It's you hit a great point there, and I've watched this through my career. Where you see 10 or 15 cent, 20-cent jump in corn over a week or two period. Man, I tell you what, it gets people fired up and excited. And you're exactly right. The psychological digestion of it was 425, now it's 410. Man, I don't know what is this really happening? And then kind of cascades from there, and you see that ability. I will say this: one thing I have noticed on the equipment side of the business is that when there's a lag in we've got people coming through, they don't know how to buy stuff, and there's a lag between the pricing. Is about a 6-month lag. It feels like 3-month lag before people really start in their heads like, oh, I guess this is a good market. We're starting to see things pick back up, because a lot of the guys that hey, we're not buying anything this year. Now they're, maybe we restart that quote on that, whatever we were looking at, let's go take a look at that. But 3 months into it is before it feels like on the retail side of it, before people realize, oh, we're back in a stable market again. All right, cool. So we're going to do this. And then they play that game for as long as they can. And then it's usually on the backside of that, it's 3 to 6 months before they realize that maybe the market's not as good as we thought it was anymore. And that lag in there is always, you got to really measure that and pay attention to it.
Well, that's interesting because, you've been, your career up, you were on the retail side there. So you were, that lag, I totally get how that's real. I'm out there. The auction front is interesting because, again, if price of corn goes up in the morning, sales at noon, there's no lag. And that's, it's fascinating.
Very reactionary.
You would think from afar, looking at the space, you'd think it'd be flipped, where it'd be like, because farmers are very conservative people financially.
Yeah.
And you'd think if a drop, it would be like, oh, and it'll make you pull back. But it just takes a bit. But again, that positivity, which I guess if you're a farmer, lifelong farmer, even if you wouldn't admit it, you have to be an optimist. So when that's confirmed and it jumps, and here this thing I'm bidding on today, which I need, it just that any little force to make you go, oh, okay, I'll bid one more time. If you add that up, that's 35 years of tracking this. It's noticeable, big time.
If I just had $1 for every time I bid on something that said I got to bid it one more time, I'd be a rich man, because I'm the king of the, all right, here's where I'm stopping here, and then like, oh, I hit it one more time. No, I hit it one. Next thing you know, I'm 15 or 20% higher than what I really intended to buy it for.
Right. Well, now, Casey, you drifted into interesting, because our friend Cheyenne Kramer with Farm Journal just pinged me, and she's like, hey, Pete, we need your October column. And the theme of the issue, I hope I'm not letting this any proprietary information out, but it was basically purchase with a purpose, which is a great theme across all of, farming and the inputs, obviously. And you need to have a plan, which farmers do. But I thought it was a good topic. So I was like, okay, what machine repeat pointers could I give along this topic of purchase with a purpose? And I'll share 2 of them. One was just like you described right now, that, okay, whatever you're bidding on at auction, you kind of go in with a plan. And I so often when we're out filming, people go, hey, Pete, what do you think that thing's going to bring? And I'll say, well, okay, here's what our numbers are showing. I'll say, what are you thinking? And they'll say, 125. And then I just observe as the bidding is happening, and oftentimes you see those folks bidding at 140, 145, which is totally cool. My advice is just have a number and just strip the emotion out of it. And if it goes, I'm done.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I'm the guy who reports on auction pricing. But, there'll always be another one coming along. And patience is a virtue. That's a truth, a biblical truth. Now, if you flip it, though, one of my other purchase with a purpose machine repeat things I shared was, if you drift into what I call the smile factory, so let's say that 1156, those don't come along every day. And when one shows up, And you can look at the numbers and go, well, it should only be 55,000. But there ain't going to be another one floating along too often. And if your financial powder's dry and you buy that thing and it makes you happy, there's not a lot in our world today that makes people smile all the time. And if you can buy a smile, Machinery Pete says, bid again and buy it. Like that 1150 Massey a couple weeks ago that Danny Coons, Alex Kerr sold, and Arthur, Illinois, went for 51.5. Looked like brand new. You could sit there and say, oh, that's crazy. That's a record by whatever, $15,000-$20,000. But you know what? If you want the world's nicest Massey 1150 and you got the dough, don't just buy it and bring it home and be happy and make you smile, and that's winning in my book.
Just make sure that your smile is a happy smile, not a nervous smile, because those are two dynamically different things. Because I've been on both sides of those smiles. Now
we could take the Moving On podcast into marital advice, because I've heard a lot of these phone calls from the auction, like, honey, and it's all good. Ideally, your wife is with you or your partner is with you at the auction, and you're like, hey, we're on the same page. Let's get it. But no, it's all good. We want happy smiles. I'm not talking about nervous smiles. I'm talking full on this. I look out at this 1156 in my shed and I'm just happy as a clam. That to me, I don't care if you paid 62.5 and that was 10K over you got what you wanted, and that's beautiful.
Yep. I've seen a lot of those too, where the phone call starts out with, guess what we got? And then,
Yeah, that's actually around the country. I listen to these conversations. It tends to be a little more tentative up north here. Yeah. Maybe I'll wait till how am I going to do? Let me think about it on my drive home, how I'm going to break the news here. Down south, it's more of just call up your wife and then, I don't know. I'm sure Pete's kind of a fan of the openness of the Southerners that we deal with. I'm working on it, but I'm a Northern boy, so we got some miles to go.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it goes from what I bought to what we bought in that conversation.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A lot of times, we also bought new countertops for the kitchen, and we did the bathroom.
Yeah,
that's kind of the counter. Yeah. When the price of corn goes up, conversations change in a lot of directions. That would also be one of them, I think.
They definitely do. Definitely do that for sure. All right, Greg, probably a good place to stop. Folks want to reach out to you, get more information about speaking and whatnot, just go to machinerypete.com and go to the contact page. And
just drop us a note, give us a call, hit me on Facebook. However, I'll be around.
Be right on. Well, appreciate you being on the podcast, Greg. We've got any speaking engagements coming up you want to let people know about?
Well, I've got some business to business stuff I'm doing. Nothing right on the near horizon for kind of open events, but we will be filming some auctions coming up. So stay tuned to our social media channels. We'll get that schedule out and hopefully can see you folks out at the sale soon.
Right on. Well, Greg, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next week.
Sounds great, Casey. Have a good one.
All right. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcast after.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planter upgrades and see why nothing runs like a deer.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Markets. We got Chip Nolan here with Blue Reef Agri Marketing talking about what's going on in the marketplace. Chip, how you doing today?
Hey, doing well, Casey. You got some nice fall-like temperatures here in Central Illinois. So it's my favorite time of year. Football started, so no complaints on my end right now.
Best weekend of the year. You got Labor Day weekend. You get about 4 or 5 days of college football in there, and then you get. I'm a dove hunter, so dove season opened on the 1st. Best weekend of the year for me. And the fall weather is here too. We've got, it's 52 degrees this morning. I walked outside and it'll be like 78 or 80 degrees or something like that today. It's
perfect. If we could have about 8 weeks of that, I would not complain whatsoever.
I'm right there with you. Well, fall coming up, so we're starting to look at harvest conditions. Those things start rolling through. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about. Hopefully, we can squeeze it all in here on this episode. But you look at the price of corn, and you had a huge run up Friday. You had 12.5 cents or something like that last Friday. The corn, front month corn, took off and ran, and we're seeing it there. Now we're looking at some. Right now, I think my last alert showed December corn at 4.19 1/4. That's a big swing from where it was, and the tell of actually getting out of the field and looking. Go back to the August report from the USDA, 189 bushel was what they came up with, and the reports coming out of the field through the Pro Farmer Tour, as well as just other independent sources, are saying not so fast, and just like Lee Corso used to say, it's one of those things where you look at it now, you're seeing some real struggles out there. Not like it's going to be a horrible crop by any means, but we're going to be lucky to get to where we got to last year from what I've been reading and what I've been seeing out there as far as reports go. So, Chip, as you're looking at that market, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? I think that 188.8 August number by the USDA, the market realizes that's likely the biggest number. It's going to come down from there. It's just a matter of how much. And so I think it's a nice segue. We're starting into fall here. Got some early harvest activity in the south, maybe south of Interstate 70. I'd say within the next week, the harvest will pick up steam. And, at least here in the Eastern Corn Belt, both the Pro Farmer Tour of actual boots on the ground doing checks and then farmers, checking fields. I think the Eastern Corn Belt will be lucky to be as good as a year ago in the end result. And it just got really dry here late. It's not hot by any stretch, but we have had a stretch of 3 or 4 weeks here where we just haven't had a lot of rain. And so this crop is not finishing in a great way. It's probably taken some yield off as the beans mature. You're starting to kind of see some ugly disease spots out there, whether that's white mold or sudden death or something else. I'm not sure. And so I think the market is kind of grappling with, okay, it's a big crop. Even if it's the same as last year, it's a big crop. We got to kind of logistically get through, a lot of bushels through the channels here over the next couple of months through harvest. But in the end result, I'm not so sure, like you said, if it's going to be any bigger than a year ago on this corn crop. It certainly isn't in the Eastern Corn Belt. Pro Farmer, if it is bigger, I think maybe Minnesota, maybe South Dakota, maybe Nebraska, Iowa. I don't know. You're hearing all the disease, the southern rust issues in Iowa, and I think it's come on so fast that, it's relatively new, especially for Iowa. We just don't know what the effect of that will be on yield. It certainly is going to take top end yield off. It's just, is it 1%? Is it 30%? I don't think anyone really has a good handle on that. So the September crop report coming out on the 12th, they're probably out there actually as we speak, continuing with some of their field checks. That's going to be really important to set the stage for, how big of a drop do we see in yields. And if it's just a half a bushel or a bushel, corn's probably going to have, a big probability of retesting the lows. If it's 4 or 5 bushel cut in the September report, the market might get fearful that, hey, we maybe have another 4 or 5 to go in October, and that could become pretty bullish. So really interesting time of the year. That Pro Farmer Crop Tour really kind of made things, turned the dial from maybe, depressing and dreary and, how low are we going to go to, like you mentioned, the College Game Day reference, not so fast, my friend. This crop may not be quite as big as what, people had expected a month ago.
Yep. And then the same thing on the soybean side of the tape here. If you're looking at what's going on there, we've seen some pullback on that, about 4%, and some projection that we see out there. We're also seeing, you were talking about before I started recording, in your area, you're seeing some things pop up out there. You're seeing some mold issues. You're seeing some sudden death issues. You're seeing those kind of things pop up. I guess as you're looking at soybeans, it's like there's corn and soybeans usually have a very harmonic kind of relationship, and they're kind of fighting against their own battles right now.
Yeah, they are, and kind of a similar but different, right? I mean, in the case of corn, you've got yields coming down, but demand is phenomenal. Arguably in some segments of corn demand, best ever. And so you combine that with shrinking yields, and it can become somewhat explosive. Kind of the opposite in beans. Yeah, yields are probably coming down, but we have yet to see any movement on a Chinese trade deal. 0 sold to China. Now, the good news, the silver lining here is that the rest of the world, we're cheap enough on bean prices that the rest of the world exports at this point in the calendar are the second best we've ever seen. So we are picking up some business outside of China, but the market is kind of figuring out or trying to figure out how much of a cut in bean yields and how much will that support the cut in demand. The good news is the USDA historically, if they determine that there's a 2 bushel yield cut needed, they'll do it right away on this September crop report and maybe follow up in October. On the demand side, historically, the USDA has been slower to move and adjust demand. They don't just, come in and say, we're going to take 250 million bushels out of bean demand in 1 month. Historically, it's not impossible that they would do that. That's what the bean market's going to be grappling with here for, weeks and months to come is, what's crop size? We probably digested the biggest crop on the lows, but we probably also, unfortunately, have factored in the biggest demand number, on that August crop report in beans. So going to be a real battle. And again, it's a big crop, no matter where it turns out. Even if it's a 52 bushel bean crop, it's a big crop. Historically, farmers move beans at fall and store corn. And if that's the case this year, there's a lot of bushels to move through. So we've seen the last couple of days, some give and take. The market tried to rally. The bean market sold off because we haven't seen much progress on the Chinese trade demand front. In fact, this past weekend, there was a Chinese trade representative in Washington talking. He left, and you know how that went because there wasn't a tweet in the middle of the night by the president about some massive best trade deal ever. So you can kind of know in advance how those talks went, and that disappointed the bean market. That's why we saw some of those double-digit losses yesterday. Saw friendly news yesterday afternoon, a 4% decrease in crop conditions, more than the market expected. Started off higher, and then we went into lower territory by, early morning hours in beans. So there's still a lot of concern about that demand front on the bean side.
Yeah, a lot of stuff to pay attention to there. And we've been in this world for a long time where one news headline away from explosive moves up or explosive moves down. And it's kind of all over the place right now. So.
Yeah, the good news with that is that, the funds who can push these markets, they're pretty flat, maybe a touch long in beans. They're short in corn, but about half of the position size that they were in corn, over the past month or so. And so it's kind of the wrong time on the calendar that the funds would come in, especially in the corn market, just come back in and establish a 250,000 contract short position. It seems like we're at a point in the calendar, especially with the assumption yields are shrinking, that the funds, are kind of done being short. And that doesn't mean we won't go lower. It means maybe have seen the lows, not that we can't retest the lows, but, I think that is maybe one feather in our cap that maybe the fund selling on the aggressive manner that they had been is kind of a thing of the past because we're far enough into the calendar that, they're past that prime point where, we've squeezed the most amount we could historically out of a short position by the time we turn the calendar into early September here.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump over to talk on the protein side real quick. Cattle, man, I'll tell you what, they're still hanging out at the contract highs. And you and I have talked about this for I don't know how long, that we're like this, we're probably going to see a reversal back. And you start to see that kind of flirt with that for a minute. It just takes off and goes again. Right now I see feeder cattle are at, $3.63 a pound right now. So that's crazy.
When you say that, it just sounds stupid, doesn't it? It sounds like what are we talking about?
It does. So I guess what are you seeing that is going to tell you? I mean, if it feels like the marketplace, everyone's just kind of holding on to be like, we're ready for this, to take place. We know it's coming. We see it's coming. We just don't know when it's coming. And it's if you get some apprehension in the market right now,
Yeah, I mean, it's like a broken record. It's getting kind of like there's really not much to talk about in the cattle market. I mean, we have tight supplies. The border's closed to Mexico. We're not importing Brazilian beef. It's about the most explosive, bullish scenario that you can imagine. There's just nothing on the bear side of the equation right now. And that's a little scary because it's not like it's just overnight and all of a sudden, it's bullish in cattle. It's been 2.5 years now. And it doesn't seem like it's fixing itself. All that being said, the higher we go, and I know we've talked about this, if you're out there thinking, I'm going to wait and see how high this thing goes. And then, when we top out, even if we're a little bit lower, I'll sell this thing and get some hedges on. The longs in this market are the packers and the funds. The producer is short, obviously, short hedger. That's a natural position for cattle producers. If and when this thing turns and the funds decide, hey, I'm done being long, and the packers decide I'm done being long, and maybe I want to get short now, there's no buyer left in the market. The natural buyer would be short hedgers buying back their short contracts once they move the fat cattle. And so my point with that is when this top comes, when the correction comes, I would expect it's going to be $30, $40 very quickly in both fats and feeders. It'll be impossible to predict when it comes. It'll be, in my opinion, impossible to catch the top. You'll have to sell it $6, $8, $10 off the highs. Psychologically, that is the hardest trade in any market environment in history. And typically what it means is people sit on their hand. They freeze. Say, I can't sell that. We're $10 off the highs in cattle. I'll wait for the next $3 bounce. And then all of a sudden you wake up 4 days later and you're $40 off the highs. That's how this thing will end. I'm very confident of it. At what price level that is, no one can predict that. And if they tell you that, run fast because they don't know. But right now, it's about as bullish a setup continuing as you could find. Now, what can change that? Obviously, open the border to Mexico. We get some trade deal, with Brazil. We start letting the Brazilian beef come in. I think we are slowly building the herd, but it just takes time. You can't do that fast enough to, stop this cattle market in its tracks. So still a friendly setup. I think that's spilling over. And, you look at the hogs, crazy numbers. For September, you've got the cutout. I don't know where it is. I haven't checked it in a few days. It was, well over $100, approaching 120. I think it's had a little bit of a back off. So that's almost unheard of as you're coming into the third and fourth quarter of a year is to have, the hog cutout north of 100. I think you're seeing direct correlation to, some demand bump from switching over from high-priced beef. Poultry's probably the same. That protein side is about the opposite of the grains. Couldn't hardly be any more bullish setup, whereas on the grain side, we're looking at, shrinking yields, but still big crops that we got to deal with here at harvest.
Yep. It's the same thing on the hog side. If you look where hogs are right now, you're looking at lean hogs right now. The October contract's 95.5, and 95.55. I mean, it's just incredible. So typically, when both of them are high, you see one of the other ones kind of doing the other thing, and you're not seeing that on the hog side at all.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, if anyone would have told you and predicted, hey, we're going to come into September with October hogs knocking on the door $100. Just has not happened many times in history, maybe only twice, once for sure, maybe twice in history. So crazy levels. And hogs are kind of, all the press and the PR and the stuff you hear on the news. It's all about beef in the cattle side. And the hog market's over here sitting, just quietly under the radar saying, hey, we're, approaching some historic numbers for this point in the calendar too, just very quietly. So hogs are the quietest bull market you've ever seen because the cattle market's taken all the thunder away.
Yep, for sure. All right, a good place to stop. Folks want to reach out to you, get more information about what you're doing over at Blue Reef Agri-Marketing. What's the easiest way to do that?
Yeah, probably two ways. Our main office number in Morton here is 309-507213. You can also check out our new and improved website. It's www.bluereef.com.
Okay. Well, Chip, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next time.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Casey.
Right on. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcast after these messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you. See you next year, loser. That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like ExactApply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
Welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Got Aaron Findle back here to talk about what's happening in the world of equipment. So Aaron's coming back. You got to do this. Got to break out the air horn, baby. And
there we go.
And get it ripping. Aaron, how you doing, bud?
I am terrific.
Good.
It's fall.
It is fall. It feels great out.
Fall is upon us. More importantly, what happened Saturday? Actually, what happened Thursday? Football is back.
Oh yeah, football's back. Yeah, 100%.
Now
Football's
we're
back.
rocking and rolling.
Football's back, and it's dove season.
Happy till February.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? It's is that because Chiefs will be playing and the Broncos won't? Is that why? Is that why?
Not quite. You know what? Get this. I had no idea the Hunts had so much money. Did you know they're the second richest owners?
Yeah, they own
behind Walmart.
Yeah, they have the Chiefs.
Save money, live better, go Broncos.
What don't they have something to do with the? Well, they had something to do with the Ravens before they sold it, I guess. When it was the Browns back in the day.
Lamar Hunt's an old school.
Yeah,
was an old school oil man. So
he started the FC.
Yeah.
So
did you know that's because he wanted to start the Cowboys and the NFL said no? So the next year, the Cowboys showed up in Dallas.
I didn't know that, but that sounds.
So he's like, well, then I guess we'll go to Kansas City and start our own thing.
Yeah, that sounds like something a rich dude would do. So
yeah,
kind of synonymous with that.
Yep.
All right, let's talk a little equipment here. One of the most consistent questions I've had across my career is why? What specs matter and why? Right, and I think that is probably the. It's a tough question to answer because it's easy to sit here and say, hey, put all the specs on there. That way, when it comes back in, then you fit everybody, right? Everybody will want a piece of that. But at the same time, there's a regional line you have to cross or walk anyway. That is very much pointed towards, if I'm in the heart of wheat country, the whole chopper versus spreader thing and the power cast versus, regular conventional, spreader, those kind of like all that stuff comes into play. And the age-old argument is, well, if you do all these things to it, you're stealing horsepower and this, that, and the other thing, yada, yada, yada. And I think the easiest thing to point to when it comes to specs and the easiest thing to tell a story about it is powerful bins, because when they first came out, they were like, "Oh man, why do we need powerful bins? This is dumb." And now you can't hardly sell a combine without powerful bins, right?
Right.
It's very difficult to do that. So the evolution of specs as they can roll through. When you're looking at various combine specs and those kind of things, if you're in the deep south, IVT and ILS front ends and transmissions and stuff like that, all those things come into play. They have a different story to tell down there than they have to tell in the Midwest, right? And it's just kind of so on and so forth. So I think the question I get all the time is, hey, if I'm buying a new machine, but I want to maximize my retail value when I go back in for trade value, or I'm going to sell it on my own, or whatever it is, what do I need to look for? And I think it's a combination of two things. One, it's how much regional presence am I going to have with my machine, and how much nationwide presence am I going to have with that machine? What's that look like?
Right.
And those are the things. Those are the things that come into play. So what I'm telling people is, okay, when you're looking around your neighborhood, you take 100 miles or 200 miles within your area, what's the common thing you see on that machine? Make sure you have that on there, right? Take a look at, broaden that out to about 500 miles. And what are you seeing out there? And you can see that like when you go to machinerypete.com or whatever. You can go out there and look and see, hey, within a 500-mile radius, what's the most common thing that's popping up? Those are the specs that you're going to want to see at least have on there. Now, can you put in the heated floor mats and massaging seat, right? Is that going to trip somebody's trigger? Somebody out there is looking for that, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So those are the kind of things you start looking at as you start going on the extra stuff and those kind of things. So, Aaron, as you sell stuff all over the country, what are some of the things you're looking at when you're looking at specs on machines?
Well, a couple things to your point. We out here on the high plains with our wheat combines for the longest time, the bulk of it was Shelbourne heads, and then the guys had corn, and it doesn't rain here. So with a Shelbourne head, you don't need a chopper, okay? And if it never rains, why would you fold the bin closed?
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
we went through a transition period out here where at one time the bulk of combines were manual fold spreader machines.
Yeah.
I am a firm believer in what I have coined the tri-power. Power fold, power cast, power rear. In today's world, you got to tweak that because now I would prefer to have the advanced power cast,
Sure.
but it's still power cast. It's
Sure.
still a tri-power. It's just
Yeah.
smarter about it. So
It's a little more power in the tri.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So having done that with several groups of customers, it's not, they're paying for that extra for the power fold and the chopper and those are expensive bumps from a manual fold spreader combine. Okay. And though you're not, anybody who says, oh, well, put 4-wheel drive on there, you're going to get it all back. You're never going to get it all back. You're never going to get everything of a spec back, but you get percentage across the machine. Okay.
And some of those specs, you're going to get a bigger percentage than others.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Power cast, that's not really a bump because it just should be there.
Right.
So 4-wheel drive. Now,
Okay.
20 years ago, 4-wheel drive was a big bump. Today, it's less of a bump, but more important. Just because the industry is another thing, is probably the biggest indicator for how you should spec your machine, other than how you yourself need it. Okay.
All right, let's walk through these real quick. Let's go through these the tri-power thing. Okay, so let's start with the power rear wheel drive, right?
Right.
PWRD, right? And so that is regionally speaking, that could either make or break the sale of your combine, right?
Right.
If you're in, for example, Southeast Kansas, where I grew up at, right? South Central Kansas, where I grew up at. 4-wheel drive was just a thing on combines, right? If it didn't have it on there, you're calling up Mudhog, can I get a rear end, right? That's just kind of what it was, right? I'm not saying that it was 100% accurate, but it was, high 80s, low 90% of the machines that came through a 4-wheel drive, right? Now, did you get all that money back on trade for that specific thing? Yes, that was already built into the price of the machine. It was what it was because you could see a dramatic resellability on 2-wheel drive combines. The difference between the two was noticeable, right? It wasn't like $5,000 on a $400,000 machine. It might be $25,000 or $30,000, $40,000 on a $400,000 machine. So absolutely necessary to have. 4-wheel drive out where we're at now here in the Panhandle is why do we need 4-wheel drive?
Right.
I don't get it. Now, a lot of reasons why you need 4-wheel drive. 4-wheel drive is not just because it's muddy out; it's also performance of the machine, right? The machines are huge now,
climbing up
hills, and everything.
Climbing hills is a huge thing that guys don't realize with 4-wheel drive.
It makes a huge difference in the performance of the machine, right? So again, it goes back to that. What's that regional spec look like, and where are you trying to hit? If you put a 2-wheel drive machine out there right now, you got obviously right now we sell a ton of 4-wheel drive machines out here in the Panhandle, or 2-wheel drive machines out here in the Panhandle. But if you want to be able to sell it outside of that, 4-wheel drive has to come into play. And I've always said to people, hey, if you're a multiple combine buyer, right, you're going to buy 1 or 2 or 3 combines or whatever it is that you're doing, spec those all out a little bit different so that you have this, one of them maybe 2-wheel drive and 2 of them 4-wheel drive, or 2 of them 2-wheel drive and 1 of them's 4-wheel drive. But kind of laying that out there like that. So when you're looking at those things, again, it goes back to where the pockets are at. And it's not like the nation is predominantly 4-wheel drive and then there's these little pockets of 2-wheel drive. It's like a 50-50 split, really, if you think about it, right?
Well, if anything, 2-wheel drives, it might even be, honestly, it might even be 65-35 2-wheel drive in the lead yet.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the resellability of the machine.
Right.
And
that's
that is going away where it's at.
Yep. So looking at 4-wheel drive, to me, that is, depending on where you're at, if you're in a place where everything's 4-wheel drive, don't buy a 2-wheel drive combine, right? Because the used equipment guy sitting there's going to be like, dude, it's 2-wheel drive. What do you want me to do with this? Right? what do I do with my hands? I don't know what to do. And that's a trigger that you need to pay attention to, right? Now, if you're in a place where two-wheel drive is a prevailing machine out there, then you can have that conversation about, hey, I have more than one combine. I might make one 4-wheel drive because I know I'm going to open up a wider marketplace for me to sell that machine, but I can also sell that machine in my area too, right? So it makes some sense. That's right. When you're looking at what's your thoughts on 4-wheel drive?
What I would say, I agree with you over on the overall with 4-wheel drive. I would tweak what you said to the guy that buys multiple, like 2, 3, not the harvester, the
right
5, 6 plus, but owner operator 2, 3 combines. I would encourage him, because we're back to talking about there's no such thing as custom planters, right? And custom diskers.
Right.
Combines have an asses for seat horrible offset in the market, right? Machines per farm. That's
right.
What we need to go with.
Right.
They have a bad offset. So marketability is everything. What I would suggest to either the customer or the dealer in that scenario is get together and spec that thing for national right now sellability within what the producer can use.
Okay, that makes sense. Yep.
And not so much from I'm going to talk around this real quick. Not so much from this is the dollars and cents of it world, but ease of marketability has a direct reflect on that to the producer.
Right.
Okay. If we get, oh man, these 3 combines is instant to the dealer, right? 3 combines from one guy. Nobody gets happy. Okay. But if they're supremely nationally marketable and they fly out of here, the dealer is then more apt to, okay, well, let's dig into this again. And because of their marketability, it then has a reflect on numbers. It's kind of a prove it game, if you will. Because you also have the option of, man, these things did not move. I guess let's just spec them like local machines.
Right.
And try it that way. And then he saves money because, well, we went lower spec or whatever the case may be, but it does benefit the producer. Sometimes it takes a little time to experiment.
Yeah. Yep. And it makes it trying to find that sweet spot, what that is. I mean, when you and I were working together, we played that game, and it probably took us, I would say 3.5 to 4 buying cycles to really dial that into what that was. And then about
everything 4-wheel drive. Well, yeah. Not everything.
Well, the thing about that is once you figure it out, then it starts to change again. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you got to go back through that whole dance again to make everything.
100%.
But I think there is something to be said about understanding what, like we've talked about a million times on here. There's like five specs on a combine that really matter, right?
Right.
And those are, knowing what those are just givens. Like you're going to make sure that's on there, right? Like you talked about. If you could have a combine set up with power rear-wheel drive, power cast, power fold, and then if you start looking at what kind of tires are you going to put on it, what's that look like, and then what the feeder house is. Those are the 2 things. Those are really the things that really stand out on the machine.
You have tech.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a whole nother.
That's a half hour with the AMS guy, and whatever you want is on there. So
right, and that's the thing where you start talking about tech and those.
Whereas I wish this had custom cutter package. Well,
yeah,
can't do nothing about it now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay, we're bringing it in the shop real quick, and we're gonna harden everything real fast. We're throwing paint on some extended wear real quick.
Take everything off and hard surface it all.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing about that too. That's another good example of that, right? When I first started 10 years ago, I'd say 10 years ago, but probably 15 years ago, the custom cutter package was just what it said, was for custom cutters.
Right.
And it was almost like a death knell in the combine. Well, it's got custom cutter package on it. It must be a custom cutter machine, you know. Those guys never take care of their stuff, which those are the guys, the one that have a grease gun and know how to use it. Right. You know what I mean?
For sure.
But when you're looking at that custom cutter package, it went from like only custom cutters having that on their machine to where now it's kind of
it's rare to not see.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like, why does this not have custom cutter package on it?
Right.
What's the deal? And so that's a huge thing.
Well,
The extra set of concaves and all the things that come with it, you know.
And extended wear grain handling was, you know, that was the guy who keeps his combine for 10 years.
Right.
And I got to get as long as I can before we start throwing thousands in the shop.
Yeah.
Those two together are almost a given.
Yeah. The other day I was looking through a spec for a friend of mine sent me some stuff, and I was looking through some specs, and he was asking me what it would be worth and what they were thinking as a dealer friend of mine. And I was going through it, and I was like, you have extended wear, but you don't have the custom cutter package. Like, what? Why not? And then, you know, I go, is that accurate? Is that right? And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess. I mean, it's odd.
We like really good augers, but a standard.
It's just like, you don't see one or the other. Like, you get them, you either none of them or all of them, right? And that's
right.
The strange thing about that. So again, it goes back to truly understanding that thing. Okay, PTOs on four-wheel drive tractors, right? It's not a standard option, which I don't know why it's not a standard option. It should be, because I don't know. That's the first question I get asked by somebody is, does your four-wheel drive have a PTO? And I'll say, well, yeah, why wouldn't it? And then they're like, well, okay, good. Because then the next question I want to, like you said last week, does it run? And that's the other question they ask you, you know.
Or high flow.
High flow, yeah.
Because PTO they can see in a picture, but high flow you can't tell if it doesn't say.
Yeah.
And a guy will call, does that have high flow? No, it's standard pump. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, think about 10 years ago when
you just want to disc.
Yeah. 10 years ago when we were on there's that line, you know, where you had like high flow pump was something that just came into the market, you know, and it was kind of a thing. And I argued that we need to put everything to be high flow, because for this specific thing right now, we were getting into the 50 and 60 foot air drills. I had the Cedar Special or whatever it's called on there, and you know that required an additional high flow hydraulic line just to run the fan, right?
Right.
And I was like, guys, we got to start thinking about, when we price these, we were alienating an entire generation of equipment coming out of the factory that can't operate a Gen 1 machine that they have the capacity to pull, right? And functionally work with, but you can't use that machine because it's not a high flow machine. And I go, you can't, I guess I'm not saying you can't, but it's not economically viable to go back in and turn a machine from a standard flow to a high flow machine, right? That's a whole thing, right? It's not like, oh, we're going to take the rear end off of this combine and put a different one under it.
Right.
We're going to call it good, right? So again, when you're looking at a four-wheel drive tractor right now, whether you're looking at an 830 or a 715 or whatever it is that you're looking at, to me, I think you have to have a PTO on that machine and a minimum of 6 hydraulics.
Oh, yeah.
You know, now hydraulics is a little bit different, because if you got 4 hydraulics, you can add 2 and it's not that big of a deal, right? It's, you know, it's whatever, $3,000 to do all that or whatever that is per hydraulic or whatever it is to do that. But it's the mechanism in which that those hydraulics should be fed, right? It's a high flow or not. And
exactly.
Now we've got, like, you've gone beyond high flow and you're like super duper high flow now. Like, you know, you've got this like level 5 high flow, and that's where we're at now, you know, with this new generation of high flow hydraulics.
Right.
And that's a
they
whole
should just call it the tanker package.
I know. Like, hey, you guys have that level 5 high flow? Because that's what I'm looking for. And because I understand level 6 is coming out next year. So, you know, those are the things you got to pay attention to. But again, going back to the sellability of that machine, in certain parts of the world, a bareback 4-wheel drive machine, still a very viable machine, right? But it's like this big of a circle, right?
Exactly.
That covers that, right? Where you've got everybody else is looking at, because 4,000 bushel grain carts, right? That's why you have 4-wheel drive PTOs, right?
Right.
You've got these huge, massive air seeders. You got these huge, massive planters. You got all these different things that are going in there to make this stuff work. So that is, again, understanding what the marketplace looks like and understanding the viability of what how that impacts your entire machine. One of the biggest arguments you and I used to talk about all the time, and I was on the opposite side of this than you were, but it was what a spreader. So we first started speccing out combines and kind of trying to put together a base spec, if you will, on what we wanted to, how we wanted to have our multiple unit rolls every year come through. One of the things we talked about a lot was like we should come up with a quote unquote standard spec tractor, standard spec combine, and then this is how we want to sell it so we can have better resellability. 10 years ago, when we started looking through this, the difference between a chopper and a spreader was like 10 grand or something like that in the price pages. It wasn't that big of a deal. 15. Okay. It wasn't really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of the price of the equipment. Fast forward to when the thing comes back in, there might be a $40,000 spread between a spreader and a chopper machine, right?
Right.
So you're looking at almost 3 times as much depreciation of what that spec was, 15 grand, almost 3 times as much depreciation in that machine because it didn't have the price of that spreader, right?
Right.
The difference,
exactly.
Almost 3 times as much depreciation because of that. Now, that was really misleading to folks when they say, "Well, there's only 15,000 coming out of the factory. Now you're telling me it's $40,000 or $45,000 less because it has a spreader and not a chopper." And the short answer was yes. That's exactly right. And those are the things that stand out. So, walking you through that and educating the person that's buying the machine, because once it's used, and it is what it is, and
right.
But again, when you're buying a used piece of equipment, you got to pay close attention to what you're buying, because again, that tertiary or that fourth buyer, that's out there that's going to come in and buy that piece of equipment is looking for specific specs.
Oh, for sure.
All the way down the line. It's not just the guy that's looking for the spec coming out of the factory, right? And the first generation guy, but that third, fourth buyer that's out there, they're all looking for that same similar spec, whether it's a PTO on your 4-wheel drive or PowerFold on your combine, or Planter's is a good example of that too. Is an electric row, which a lot of that stuff anymore now is, I want electric and I can do just that. I can kind of spice that up. Back in the day when you had Planters come in, it was hard to value a Planter outside of anything other than what just the base spec bar and planting units were, because everything else on it was a fingerprint, right? I mean,
right.
What you want, what I want are totally different things, right? And I think that's again something to pay attention to. But it feels like as things have come along with sprayers and planters especially, those specs have become a lot more homogenized across the space, right? You're looking at a space now where, you might want Groff cleaners and I want, whatever, but how the machine is actually spec'd and come out of the factory, they're mostly similar, not completely similar, but it used to be every one of those things were a fingerprint, man. They were totally different from each other. They looked the same, but they were totally different. And that's changed a lot over the years.
Well, that's because everybody wants everything loaded up now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a culture shift, if anything. It's just like that second and third buyer. They used to buy based off of whose it was.
Right.
Or where it came from.
Yeah.
Now, whereas that late model used buyer, he was always a spec buyer.
Yep.
Always. That's why he's in the game he's in. I want this tractor, but if I get it with 200 hours on it, I save a boatload versus this one over here.
Right.
So as the third, fourth buyer become more, and the reason that buyer is paying more attention to specs, all the machinery on his farm demands him to.
Yeah.
It's not, I want this because it has this. It's, I need this because it has this.
Yep.
I can't run what I have with my second gen 8R. I need the 8R.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of, as we're a long ways from $7 corn era currently, that's what's pushing a lot of purchases. It's the wait till the last minute. It's the we're not going to do anything till we have to because of how everything is, and it's all then shove the now we have to for tech purposes, and that's what's feeding that world right now. But back to the root of the conversation with that third and fourth buyer paying more attention. It's as vital as ever to get the right specs on there.
Yep.
And there needs to be even if the guy has ordered the same thing for 30 years, there needs to be a discussion all the time, just because with tech driving so much in ag right now, things change weekly.
Yep.
Sure. You could have ordered a wallop of tractors in April, and why didn't we pick this other code? Because in 5 years, we already know they're not going to blah, 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 because we just found out with this press release. Yeah. And it's like, it's constantly on the forefront of tweak this, change that, move it over here, and go that route.
Yeah, and it greatly affects your sellability. So my word of advice to everybody listening to this right now is have the conversation with your dealership, with the guys that you, if you're a used buyer or a new buyer, have that conversation with your dealership of what are the most common specs you see people asking for regionally, and what are the most common specs you see out there on the national marketplace, and then blend those together the best you can to have a machine that you can bring back in and you're going to maximize your resellability.
Right.
Okay. All right, Aaron. Good place to stop. High Plains Wholesale. Folks want to reach out and see all the fun stuff you got going on over there. Aaron is the chief entertainment officer over there.
There you go.
And if people want to see that, where they go see that stuff at?
You can catch High Plains Wholesale on Facebook and on TikTok. I, Aaron Fintel, am on Twitter and Facebook, and you can see the same specials there. I share them on my pages, and you can call me or text me, 308-760-1193. Always got stuff willing to deal, so get after it.
Right on. Casey Seymour, you can find me Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I don't know where else I'm at. You find me there. All either at Moving Iron Podcast or Moving Iron LLC. Check me out there, and you can see all that stuff there. You can see the audio version of this over at AgWeb under the podcast section. You can see that. You can also go to Farm Journal's YouTube channel, and you can see the video version of this podcast as well. I want to thank Aaron Fennell, Greg Peterson, and Chip Nellinger for being on this podcast this week. So until next time, let's move some iron, folks. Out.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, Moving Iron is available on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere podcasts are found. So until next time, let's move some iron.